where my mind went when you said that was specific to like even what we, the Black community, look at as wellness. I think that we're starting to get more intentional. Wellness is more than just like treating yourself. Wellness is more than just, getting your nails done, getting a massage.
Coming back to like who you are as a person and like who you want to be. I think that is like really like deep self-care. But I will say like being a business owner is probably like the most I've ever learned, like in school, like in job, like there's nothing that will challenge you like creating something on your own. And I always say like it's been so amazing because the growth of my business and the growth of myself have felt so synonymous over the past couple of years. And like, I'm so grateful that I've been able to do that.
Welcome back to another episode of the Minor Detail Pod. I'm your host, Khaila Ariel. And listen, I am so grateful that you are tuning in today. Per usual, like I say, it's going to be a good episode. It's going to be an amazing conversation. I'm biased, but they just keep getting better and better. We're into season 3 now, and I'm just super appreciative for all of you who are listening in, who are tuning in, who are sharing feedback. So continue to share, continue to share the conversations with friends and family. Listen, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're wherever you get your podcasts. And I can't wait. I can't wait to keep the conversations going. We have an amazing guest with us today. Sitting with us on the pod is Nya Jones. She is the CEO and founder of Inside Then Out. If you haven't heard of Inside Then Out, they are a wellness brand committed to empowering you to become more intentional in your daily life. Their collection of modern, minimalistic products are designed to give you the tools to prioritize introspection, growth, and self-care. All of the things that align with the Minor Detail and everything that we stand for. So I'm super grateful to have you here with us, Nya. Thank you for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you feeling today? That's like my level set question. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It's been a good morning. I woke up, did my morning routine. Excited to talk to you today. So
amazing. Speaking of your morning routine, talk us through what that looks like. Because for those of us who aren't familiar with the brand, I think I'm trying to remember how I came to, but I want to say Brittany on your team. I followed her for some time now, and she would journal and like share her perspective on just like what she would be reflecting on. And then once she reached out about having you on the show, I was like, absolutely, like this is our jam. This is what we do. But talk to us a little bit about like what your routine is like, and even the brand, like what you guys are doing to bring this same type of environment, the same type of routine in front of other people so that they can enjoy that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, like my morning routine has definitely shifted over time, and something that like I've been prioritizing more recently is just doing like 2 to 3 things each day that make me feel good and make me feel energized. And also just like listening to my body, because sometimes that may be going to the gym, maybe that's yoga or stretching or going on a walk. But for me, I think lately I've been definitely a fan of like slow morning. So like in the first like couple hours when I wake up, I make sure to like kind of block off my schedule. As you probably know, I'm really big on journaling. So like journaling has been my class since I've been younger. So I definitely like journal and just like process my thoughts. Like right now I've been going through our Dig Deeper journal. So it's been checking me sometimes. And then just like a bit of like free writing morning pages as well.
I love that. I'm so excited to share more with listeners just about the brand, the types of journals, specifically like even products that you guys offer, because I think what we're all looking for is just giving ourselves permission to start, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes we just don't know how to get to that place. And I think Inside Then Out is perfect. I wish it was existing when I was on the beginning of my journey, because I was definitely that person that's like, I'm supposed to journal. Like, what do I talk about? I don't know what to talk about. So I love that you guys offer prompts. I love that, like you mentioned just a second ago, like even your own Dig Deep journal is checking you, and you literally were the creator of it. So
yeah,
no one is safe. No one is safe.
No one is safe.
It's self-care and healing all day long. Well, I'm excited to get in. I definitely want listeners to get to know you more, to hear your story, because it's literally so magnificent. So that being said, I want to dive into you starting Inside and Out a little bit more, where that came from. I know when you started your company, it was immediately following undergrad. And so when you sold out of your first product, it was literally after undergrad, within days of you sharing it. I believe it was on TikTok, right?
Yeah, I was on TikTok.
Yeah. So within days of you sharing it on TikTok, on social media, take us back to the beginning. How does a young and ambitious woman like yourself go from like college student to successful entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's definitely a huge transition. I will say I have always been business minded, but I always saw like me starting a business as something that was going to come later in life. I was never really sure exactly like what industry I wanted to be in. I remember I literally had a notes folder in my phone, which is like all of my business ideas that I've had over the years. And I always knew I wanted to do something that was like meaningful and had like real impact in people's lives. But again, didn't really know what that would be. When I first came up with the idea for Inside and Out, I had just graduated from college. So I was stuck in my college apartment in the midst of COVID, really just wanting to be like more intentional in my life. I think COVID did a lot of things for a lot of people. And like, it was, a terrible time, but at the same point, it forced me to slow down. And I just remember feeling like really far from myself. I remember I was going, I'm like super ambitious. So like from school to internship to job. And like, I rarely sat back and was like, what do I really want from my life? So how the idea kind of came about was like, it was a list of questions that I kind of wanted to answer for myself. And then I recognized a lot of people could be going through something similar as well, which is how the idea for the brand came about. And it's just been such an amazing journey ever since.
No, literally. So talk to us a little bit more about the execution piece, because I think where a lot of us get a little tied up or even sometimes discouraged is like, okay, I have this idea, but I don't know how to bring it to fruition. You said you had your notes app with a few questions listed, but what in you was like, okay, I'm going to take these questions on this note app and literally make it a physical product, because that is like, it's a big jump.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say again, like as mentioned, I've had like tons of ideas before, but something that kind of stuck out to me when I first came up with the idea for the journal was like, it felt very urgent. Like I was like, there was like something in me where I was like, this is like exactly what I'm supposed to do. And I'm supposed to do this right now. So when I like had the idea to when I started working on it was like same day energy. Like it was not like sitting on the idea for a while. I remember like I immediately just started like researching information. So I was looking up like, how do you create a journal? Like, how do you publish a book? Do I need to get a publishing agency? Can I self-publish this? Like, I was looking at all the options for like manufacturers and design. Like, it was just like, and I think in the beginning, it was just consuming a lot of knowledge. I think what is most scary for people who are thinking about starting a business is like, there's so much information out there and like, you don't really know exactly where to start. But I think for me, the most important thing was just really being a student and being like, okay, like this is something new. I'm willing to watch hours and hours of like YouTube and just really research like what it was going to take to create this product. Because I knew that this was what I was supposed to do.
I love that. And I think that you said two really great things. The first one was there was some urgency behind you needing to bring the idea to life. I think that's absolutely amazing. And you also spent time consuming knowledge. Like you didn't force yourself to be an expert overnight, or, it sounds like you didn't put pressure on yourself to literally have something the following day. And that's really great to hear, because I think a lot of times outside of like not knowing how to bring something to life, I think sometimes we put too much energy into needing to have it perfect the first time around, or we put too much energy into needing to have it right away. So I love that you kind of make those two distinctions, because I think that makes a really big difference when you're wanting to create something out of nothing,
And the thing is like, you can always improve, right? Like something that even I did is like the first journal that I released, I think it was really good and resonated, but like I've made updates to it since, like sometimes like I change little things about the design or even like the content, because I think there's always an opportunity to improve. And I think, again, going back to perfectionism, like that is, the enemy of growth and like really just like taking those risks. So I think definitely don't wait for it to be perfect, and don't feel like you also need to be like an expert or have all these years of experience in X industry to be able to create something beautiful.
No, that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about outside of, so you just graduated from undergrad. Outside of, needing to learn and create this new thing and bring it to life, you also had a full-time role at Meta, one of the largest companies like in the States, honestly, probably in the world. What was the role? Number one, talk to us about what that role was, and how did you balance a 9-to-5 and pouring into this new business? Because girl, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's not easy. I was working as a product specialist at Facebook in their business operations department, and I was on the news team based in New York City, but was working remotely. I think working remotely definitely helped a little bit, but it was not easy at all. I think the reality is like you're working all day, right? So it's like you have a 9-to-5, and I have all these daytime meetings for Facebook, and then also like a 5-to-9, which is like, and also in the beginning of stages of your business, like you are wearing a lot of the hats. And I think that was the hardest thing. So I was waking up early morning, shipping out orders. And then after work, I was like responding to emails. And then on the weekends, I was like trying to create content and like do our social media platforms. It is a lot of work. And I just remembered too that like I would have one-on-one calls with my manager. And this is like where you're supposed to talk about your career goals, and like all the options would literally be like,
I know it. I mean, don't mean to stop you, but I know the feeling. I know it. Continue. I'm sorry.
No, I definitely see that. And it would literally be like calls about like, here are your options. Like, do you want to switch teams? Do you want to learn this new skill? Do you want to be promoted? And there was really never space for conversations about like entrepreneurship. And honestly, sometimes I felt like I had to like make up stuff or just like make it seem like I was so interested at growing with this company when I knew I had my own business. And I'm like, I'm really interested in problem solving. And like when I knew my goal was to be like on my own. And I did that for 2 years, and like I think it was definitely tough, but I also like learned so much through that experience and like grew a lot professionally and personally.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing that number one, you can have the balance, because what people may or may not realize is that we are still human beings at the end of the day. And so having to balance that it's a literal balance act, and it requires a different level of motivation, discipline, all of the things, but also giving yourself grace, because I'm sure you were tired, especially, I mean, you're creating a brand around, self-care and healing and growth and all of these amazing things. And so in that process, I'm sure there's some tension in needing to honor that. Were there ever times where you were like, okay, this is feeling like a lot. I might need to pull back in some areas, or in this season, I need to prioritize rest because it's just a little overwhelming. Did you have any of those emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I am like really grateful for was that the start, like, and when I was starting my business was actually like right before I had started working full time. So I did have like 2 months of time where I could dedicate solely on my business. And I think that was extremely helpful, especially when you're like creating something new. And then I think on that rest piece, yes, it's super important. I think it was really hard for me too, because I had like two like conflicting ideas where it's like, on one hand, it's like the hustle culture of being an entrepreneur is like, you work hard, sleepless nights, and like, everything to meet your goals. And then on the other hand, it's like, I'm creating a brand in the wellness industry where I'm talking about rest. I'm talking about bringing it to yourself and prioritizing your mental health. So a lot of it was honestly like practicing what I preach and like creating intentional space for rest and for self-care. But then also at the back of my head, it's like I was doing something that I loved and I felt super energized by that. But then again, also like going through the flows of life, right? Like you're not going to feel extremely motivated every day. And like sometimes you will, but you have to listen to your body and say like, okay, what do I need during this time? And like, I love vacation. So I was definitely taking all the PTO that I could at Facebook. But yeah.
No, I feel you. Listen, it's a challenge, but when you are passionate about it and it's in alignment, you figure out like how do we make this work, you know? So tell us a little bit about when you knew that it was time to make that transition from corporate into becoming a full-time entrepreneur, because I understand that now you are a full-time entrepreneur and you get to do this thing full-time. What was it that ultimately sealed the deal? Was it revenue? Was it like, okay, my faith is bigger than my circumstances at this point? What was it?
Yeah. So I had some very specific financial goals that I wanted to achieve before I quit. But something that I noticed within myself was that even when I met them, I was still making a lot of excuses for myself. And a lot of people around me were telling me like, wait. And obviously like Meta is an amazing company to work for. So I think there was a part of me that was like, I should feel grateful for getting the opportunity like this. Should I really be passing this up to do my own thing? And there was a lot of like imposter syndrome tied to that as well. It was almost like I was like, I'm lucky to be there, especially as a Black woman in the tech space, rather than like they were extremely lucky to have me. And then there was also the side of me that was like, if this doesn't work out, it's nice to say that I have these 2 years of experience working in corporate America for a top tech company if I ever do have to go back into the job market. And then also there's like, just like that money component, right? So it's like the luxury of working a 9 to 5 and having a business is that the money that you make in the business all goes back into the business rather than like paying your bills and like paying yourself a salary. So I think that is really important in the early stages, right? Like you have to, as a business owner, you really have to invest that money back into yourself. I think the worst thing you could do as a business owner is like get excited too early on and then like, blow through all that financial capital. When I finally decided to quit, I think it was 2 things. Like one, I was absolutely burnt out. Like I don't think I could have done it any longer. And 2 was because I knew that I had achieved so much success in my business when I was only using half my time. And I could only imagine like what I could achieve if I took that leap of faith and really started dedicating my full self to my business. I remember like I had to tell myself like, you are the most, like one of the most valuable assets of your brand. And I have to like financially invest in myself in the same way that I invest in like product and ad and employees. Cause of course, like as a business owner, like no one's going to care about your brand like you care about your brand. So I think when I came to that realization, I was like, yeah, I gotta go.
Yeah, you said so many great things. I'm like, oh my gosh, you could go so many ways with this. But I think where I want to start is number 1, coming to the realization that just as much as, you're excited to be at a company, you're excited to work for a place, you're just as much of an asset. And I think sometimes we forget that we bring value in those circumstances. And I think it does have a lot to do, like you mentioned, being a Black woman in that space, being a person of color in general, working for a company like Facebook is literally like, top tier. And so getting to that point is like, okay, chances are almost slim to none for someone like me. And so the fact that I'm here, like I really want to honor that. Was there anything specific that you found yourself doing to combat those things, to combat imposter syndrome? Or was it like, yeah, I feel like if I don't exit this space, then I'm hurting myself more than I'm helping myself, if that makes sense.
I think like on one hand, it was just like affirmations. Like I had to really like sit back and like recognize my value, right? It's like I was at Facebook for a reason. And sometimes it's hard, right? Because, you're in teams that may not be super diverse and like a lot of your colleagues look very similar. So it's like hard to make the distinction that like, yeah, like I'm here for a reason and I'm here to provide value. So I had to give myself a lot of those affirmations. And it's like, yes, like I'm educated, I have a lot of experience, I bring unique ideas to this team. And then I think the other piece of that is really just like focusing on like what your larger picture is and what your goal is. And I think a big key in before I left as well was that like, how can I benefit the most from this experience, and like what skills can I take away with me, and like what people have I been able to connect with. So like in my last like couple months at Facebook, it was really just like me taking time for myself. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to meet with X, Y, and Z, because at Facebook, it's like you have access to really schedule one-on-ones with anyone internally in the company. I'm like, who could, teach me something that I could apply to my business? And it's so crazy how certain things are and certain experiences are very full circle moments, because it's amazing to have the opportunity to work at a big company and then run a small company, because there's a lot of like things that are streamlined and created that you can learn from, right? So like, for example, like one of the first things that I did when I started really building out my team was like, we do performance reviews. And like, I pulled a lot of my experience from doing performance reviews at Facebook. And it just like taught me, right, where it's like, yeah, like it's important to like evaluate people's success. It's important to have like expectations of each role and literally spell out for people like what a level X may be versus a level, and what that performance looks like. My recruiter that I ended up hiring for my company was actually also ex-Meta.
Oh, spicy.
Yeah. So that was really cool as well.
That's so funny. You know what's really cool too is I love how you kept a perspective of not closing that chapter before it needed to be ended, if that makes sense. Because I think a lot of times when we get to that point of burnout, when we get to that point of wanting something different so badly, we almost lose sight of the value that is currently in front of us. And I think it's really amazing that you use those last couple of months to dig deep and figure out like, okay, what can I leverage from this situation? Because you're right. When you're working in some of these environments, it's literally the exact, if not the exact same thing that you're doing, but it's literally like work streams that you're going to need to implement in your own business. So why not take advantage of the amazing people that you are interacting with on a day-to-day?
Yeah, that is so true. And sometimes you don't even understand in the moment the full scope of like how each experience that you have is preparing you for the next.
Exactly. And I know you weren't like, hey, I want to schedule a one-on-one so I can quit here, but I want your knowledge. Like, exactly. I know that there's a sexier way to go about doing that for all of you who are listening, but what I'm wanting to say is like, don't underestimate, I guess, the value that is still existing while you are planning that exit strategy or you're planning the next thing, because it's real. I have moments in my job currently, because I also work full time, where while I don't have immediate plans, right, of exiting, I'm always thinking like, this is so valuable. Like if I wanted to leverage this thing for my own business, or just like for, let's say for like the podcast, for example, being able to learn new information that I wouldn't maybe have come across as efficiently, right, if I was doing this thing on my own. I just think that's awesome. And it's so sure too that you were able to recognize that, because again, like you're still like right out of college. It's 2 years post undergrad by the time you left. But these are things that, I mean, it takes people a while to pick up on these things. And that's how I know, like, you were meant for this, girl. You're meant to be in this position. It was alignment. It was supposed to happen.
The alignment was there for sure.
Exactly. So in the process of you figuring out like, okay, now it's time to pivot, were there things that you knew you wanted to put in place? Because you mentioned before, like, I thought about how much I was doing with half my time. Like, what can I can only imagine like what I could be doing with if I was giving this full-time energy. So before you made that leap, were there things specifically like, okay, I know I want to have these roles fulfilled, or I know I want to be giving, these areas in the business my time? Was there anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big piece of that too was like, I really wanted to start like building out a strong team. And like, hiring and training in areas where I felt like I maybe wasn't the best. Like, for example, one thing that was like, I noticed really early that was like extremely important was just like content creation and social media. So like we had talked about a little bit earlier, I had a TikTok video that had gone viral. And this is also still while I had my 9 to 5. And from when the video went viral, like we sold out, I think like the next day. It was just like a crazy
Wow. Yeah.
and I was literally like in my parents' house, like packaging like I think 1,000+ orders. And I was like trying to get it all out that week. I had to call everyone I knew. It was just crazy. But like I was so grateful. And I think, but something that taught me, I was like, okay, yeah, I really need to invest in social media and just like getting my message out there. So now we have like 2 content creators and like a creative director that really like hones in on that content piece. But I think like as soon as I left, I really just started thinking about like, how do we position ourselves as like a brand that does something meaningful? Like I never want someone to come to Inside and Out and just be like, oh yeah, this is just a place like for you to buy products.
Mm-hmm.
So I really started working on like that brand messaging and like how to tie that messaging into everything that we do.
I love that. I think that, I mean, I work in marketing as well. So it's like, those are all so important. I'm biased, but they really are, because in this environment, in this day and age, really like you can take your business and just awareness of your business from 0 to 100, literally like overnight, as you did. And that wasn't even intentional. So just thinking about how you can leverage more intentional input into the business in that way, between social, between messaging and ads and things like that. And what happens in such a small amount of time. So I love that it happened on accident for you, but it almost like highlighted the areas like, you picked up on it quickly, right? It highlighted the areas of focus, and you were like, okay, if this happened for me on accident, we're going to make it happen on purpose a few more times.
Exactly. Yeah. So we definitely have tried to like repeat that again. And like we had other videos go viral as well, which is super great. But I also knew that I had to be prepared for something like that, because first time around, I was definitely not prepared. But yeah.
Yeah, you got it together. So in your opinion, how important was sustainability or sustaining the business prior to transitioning? Because I think that it's one thing to just kind of like, you got your job, you have the business, and you're kind of wanting to forecast like, okay, this is what I need to make sure that we're sustained. This is what I want to have in order. How important was that for you? And was there anything specific that you did to prepare?
Yeah. So I had written out that my goal before I left was consistently making 6 figures per month, which is, I know that's a lot. Like, and that was literally like the same amount per month I was making as like my yearly meta. And that's
ambitious.
Yeah,
it's not bad.
I know.
Like I'm
and that's why I had to preface
over here.
I had to preface by saying like, I don't think that's necessary or that needs to be like everybody's goal. But for me, I think I wanted to make sure that I had way more than enough to pay myself, and in a way that wasn't causing financial strain to my business. Because something I realized, again, really early on is that like every like dollar that you spend in the beginning stages, like reinvesting that is so, so important. And then when you start saying like, oh yeah, I need to pay my apartment bill and my food and all of that, it's like you're taking away from the business growth. And I think that first couple of years can be really, really important. So that's why that was my goal. But I think apart from that, like it was really just like preparing myself to like transition to full-time entrepreneurship. Like I think the experience of being in a 9 to 5 was also good, just because it teaches you like some level of like organization and time management. And again, going back to what I was saying before, like I wanted to make sure that I was like connecting with people and developing as many skills as I could before I decided to make that transition. But I think it really comes down to like really setting like what those financial goals for you are, and like why you have those specific goals, and really understanding like, how much money is coming into your business and how much is going out, right? Because I think a big thing too is that like people hear 6 figures a month, they're like, oh my gosh, wow. And it is amazing. but also it's like you have a lot of expenses. It's like you have to pay for marketing and ads and employees and cost of products. So it's like you also want to make sure that like it's profitable and you're only pulling from that profit when it comes to the time where you can start paying yourself.
Absolutely. Where did you learn all of this from? Because I mean, you're stellar. Let's say that. But also, it's a lot to know. Yeah. And even me as a listener, I'm like, you're spot on. But how did we get to this point? Because I will say, like, number one, you have a product, multiple products at this point, but if we're thinking back then, like you have a product or multiple, so that means like fulfillment and ordering and vendors and all of that amazing stuff, and then you're building a team, and then there's this level of business acumen that is necessary to understand who, what, when, where, how, and why. So
you're making it sound so overwhelming, like, but it is like. But the thing is, it's like it's one thing at a time, right? Like I think when you start a business, you don't need to know everything about how to run a business for the next 5 years. You start exactly where you are, right? So when I started the business, my main questions are like, how do I build a product? How do I design? How will I ship out orders? I think also like Shopify, like this is not an ad, but I love Shopify. Like Shopify definitely has made it super easy, especially if you're like in the e-commerce space. Because they have so many of these aspect tied, like you can fill from there, you can design your products, all of that. But yeah, I think it really just starts like where you are. Like at a certain point in your business, like someone will ask you a question about finances and you're like, I do not know the answer to that. I need to go watch videos or learn about this or find a mentor in this specific area. And I think, again, it's like you can definitely get like information overwhelmed. So it's like, start at your own pace. A lot of things that you learn over time also just come with experience. Like, again, like all the things that I've learned in the past couple of years have definitely been over time. But I will say like being a business owner is probably like the most I've ever learned, like in school, like in job, like there's nothing that will challenge you like creating something on your own, because like you are responsible for every aspect, especially in the beginning of the role. So it's like, that's marketing, that's branding, fulfillment, all of the finance. I'm like, oh gosh, like, but you definitely like grow and learn so much. And I always say like, it's been so amazing because the growth of my business and the growth of myself have felt so synonymous over the past couple of years. And like, I'm so grateful that I've been able to do that.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned that the way that I was presenting it sounded overwhelming, because I think it's important to remember, like, it doesn't have to be, like one step at a time. We tackle one thing at a time. And when we get more leeway, we can lean into it. But for now, we're going to focus on this thing. And I think that's so important to remember, because it can be overwhelming when you're looking at it big picture. But like, I think narrowing down on individual focuses is super important. Exactly. So I love that. Exactly. I love that distinction. Well, I am so glad that you have been able to be as successful as you have been in sustaining the business and building from the ground up. Let's move into more so in like the wellness space, like getting to this point. Obviously, you mentioned earlier, like as a Black woman in Facebook or at Facebook, it's a very specific type of experience in the corporate space. Moving into the wellness space, how have you seen shifts in whether it be like the systems in the wellness space? Have you made connections with, with anyone or community specific to like where you are currently? What has that experience been like for like building community and just like, kind of establishing your roots with those relationships?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and something that has definitely come with time. I think in the beginning of starting my business, I felt very isolated just because it's like a lot of the things that I was doing, I was the first person that was in my circle doing these things. Like out of all my friends, like I didn't have a lot of friends that were in entrepreneurship or in the wellness industry. And I think over time, like I've made friends through the wellness industry, which has been super amazing. But something that's also been really important to me, especially being a Black woman in the wellness space, is that like really just like redefining what like wellness looks like for a woman of color as well. I know like for example, I live in Miami, and like Miami, a lot of people don't know, but it actually has like a pretty big like wellness community. There's a lot of like events and like yoga and meditating on the beach and sound baths. And it's like, it's amazing, but it's like, I've gone to those events and sometimes it's like, I'm the only person of color in the entire event. And that's something I'm really working. So we recently actually did an event to celebrate our 3-year anniversary. I think it was about a month ago in Miami. And it was just such a beautiful, like diverse event. And I was like, this is exactly like what I want the wellness space to look like, because I'm sure you know, it's like wellness, people of color like struggle with mental health a lot.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like trauma and things that like we need to unpack. And like sometimes we don't always come from backgrounds that encourage that. So I think it's really, really important to have these messaging, especially for communities of color, and just like connecting with people in person. I think that's something that I've really been valuing a lot recently.
Absolutely. Love what you said about redefining wellness, because I think it's so important. Where my mind went when you said that was specific to like even what we, the Black community, look at as wellness, because I think that we're starting to get more intentional about that, right? Like about taking care of ourselves, about self-care. But I think everyone's definition of it is so different, which, you know, to each its own, it's totally fine. But at the same time, I think that wellness is more than just like treating yourself. Wellness is more than just, you know, getting your nails done, getting a massage. And I love inside and out, beyond just like, you know, the physical product and the aesthetic, but also for like what you are pushing and challenging people to do and to think about. Because to your point, wellness is already not really a space for us, whether it be intentionally or unintentionally, right? Like the type of people that gravitate towards it. But at the same time, it's like wellness is also more than the stereotypical type of self-care that we've been seeing.
Exactly. And I think a big part of wellness that we've really been trying to target is like a big aspect of wellness is really looking into yourself and aligning yourself with what you want from your life. Like it's really hard to be well without fully understanding your wants and your needs and your experiences. And I think through like a lot of our guided journals, like we're trying to encourage people to like answer these questions for themselves that they may have not normally asked themselves on a daily basis, right? And really just like coming back to like who you are as a person and like who you want to be. I think that is like really like deep self-care.
Yeah, absolutely. Also love the name Inside Then Out, because it's so catchy, right? It's like focus on the inside and then we can look at the things externally. And I think that's so amazing because again, when we think about self-care, it's like Black girl luxury, soft life. And it's like all these themes that again, they're cool. They make sense. Understand why we want to prioritize them, but the inside will always be there, whether you address it or not.
Right. And I do acknowledge too, like it becomes like trendy, right? Like I think I've seen like soft life a lot, and I have no problem with the terminology or trends, especially when it inspires like, you know, I've seen like soft, like taking myself on a date, or, you know, like there's a lot of like amazing things and concepts that come from trends. But it really does come from the inside, right? Because it's like, what you pour into yourself like only shows on the outside. And I think like in so much cases, it's like, yes, like we may think of self-care as like getting our nails done or our hair done or whatever. We're like, oh yeah, I'm having a self-care day. But how are you really pouring into like who you are as a person and your own growth and your own healing? Because it shows, right? On the outside as soon as you do that.
Exactly. So this is a random question that just popped up as you were talking. Did you ever anticipate that you would be here at this point in your life?
No, definitely not. It's so crazy. Like I have a lot of like pinch me moments where I'm like, I can't believe like this is my life, because, you know, I've always known, like I've always been a very like ambitious, determined person. Like I always knew that I could achieve things in life. And I think for me, something that's important is like anything that I do, I try my best to do it well. But then you still have moments where it's like it's so amazing that I've been able to get here. And then it's just like loving what you do every day. And like, I think the hardest part for me, like, especially when people ask me questions around like work-life balance, I think it's extremely important. But it's crazy because your mind, especially when it's something you're passionate about, your mind is constantly going. So it's like, as much as I can disconnect from my laptop, I'll literally be in bed and I'll be like, oh, I have an idea. And I have to like write it down. But yeah, it's just like a really beautiful experience to be able to do something that you love and that is making you money too, because I think a lot of people think it's like either or. But I do believe that like a lot of the best businesses, especially like some of my favorite brands, you can tell it started from like a personal need or passion for what they're doing. I think it translates so well. And I think like your customers and community can really see that.
Yeah. And I think what's so interesting is like in this season of my life, I have just been really reflecting on how many people would be so much better off if they were able to do what they love. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really interesting how we start our journeys, especially really early on as children, where they're like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're like, a doctor, a firefighter, a police officer, whatever. And these are things that are just ingrained in you so early on. And then you get older and you pursue them and you're like, wait, I don't really like this thing like that. So what happens next? You know what I mean? And I love that. I think what's so encouraging about hearing you speak is that you were allotted the opportunity to go after something you were passionate about, regardless of what maybe you thought initially would be your thing or initially would be, like completion for you, maybe even.
Yeah.
And so I just love that.
And I'm telling you, I thought I was going to be a corporate girly for a lot longer. I thought I was going to be in tech. I was like, oh, I love tech. It's work from home. This is cute. Like I can climb my way up here. But like, even the thing is like, sometimes we have this like imagination of like what a role would be like, or like what your perfect job may look like. And sometimes it's just not the case. Like sometimes what you think is like the coolest job in the world, you get there and you're like, oh, wow, like this doesn't really feel like the one. And I think what's really cool, you talked about like being a child. Like I have moments where I like look back because I told you like I've journaled since I was a little girl. And I literally have like journals from when I was like 7 years old. And I remember there's like one specific one I found like a couple years ago where it was like, my notebook is my place to like relax and connect. Like, in my 7-year-old terms, I was just like describing like how like my notebook was my safe place. And like looking back at that is just like so crazy because it's like as a 7-year-old, I would never have said like, oh yeah, like I'm going to create my own journal and I'm going to talk about mental health and self-care. Like I would have never thought that. But looking back, I see how all of my experiences have led me to this exact moment. And I think that is what's really beautiful.
That's insane because number one, you were journaling at 7.
Yeah.
I think we all have diaries, but that sounds next level. So
yeah,
I'm just super inspired. Clearly, you guys, Nya is an angel and she's perfect. So we all just have to try a little harder. No, I'm just kidding. I love that though. I think that I think too, looking back, sometimes you can see little spurts of who you should be, I don't want to say this. I feel like looking back, you can see and recognize little spurts of who you are destined to become. If that makes sense, regardless of if you are initially like fulfilling that thing, you looked back and saw that you were a journaler. For me, I know when I was younger, and I mean, I'm still like this, but I used to love to talk when I was younger. And I mean, I would get in trouble for it in class and I never understood why we had to be quiet all day long. Cause I'm like, this is actually hard for me.
Yeah.
I feel like you guys are taking away something from me and now I have a podcast. So I just think that that's really cool that you mentioned that. And maybe I just talked too much, but we'll see. We'll figure it out. But I did want to ask you in sort of a closing, as an entrepreneur now doing this thing full time now, have you had to change up like your routine for self-reflection, for for journaling, or even just like your approach to mental health and wellness? Has there been any significant impact, even where you're like, yes, I have definitely had to do this thing differently? Or is it just like prioritizing, like you mentioned earlier, those slow moments?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Like there's been a couple moments where, and I'm a big proponent in therapy for everybody. I definitely like had a therapist throughout my journey, because I think too, like, again, we talk a lot about like overwhelm and burned out. And like just because I'm in the wellness industry does not make me immune to these things, right? Like I still have moments where I'm tired and I'm stressed and all of these things. And it's like, I really have to practice these habits. And I think it goes back to what I'm saying before. It's just like really listening to yourself and just trying different things, right? Like, if you sometimes go on like TikTok or social media, they're like, oh yeah, you have to like wake up, and then you have to journal, and then you have to meditate, and then you have to go to the gym, and then you have to cook 3 meals a day. And it's like those, like doing all those things may not make you feel well. Like you have to really listen to yourself and decide like what your priorities are and like what makes you feel good. And I think, again, the best thing I could have done for myself is just like allowing those things to shift as my needs change and as my schedule changes over time.
I love that. I also love what you mentioned about basically not needing to have it all together. Yeah. I think one of the like core values of the Minor Detail as a platform is just creating a space for us to just be, whether that be encouraged, be inspired, be ourselves, be authentic, but understanding like you don't have to have it all together, or you don't have to act like you have it all together in order to be successful. Like this journey is so unfamiliar to all of us. We're all just winging it. We're all just figuring it out as we go. And there's no blueprint. And so there's all of these, minor little details that come our way. That's kind of like, I don't know. One day I think I was journaling or doing something, and the name The Minor Detail came to me. But it's because I wrote like the minor little details always throw us off, and there's no blueprint and there's no blah 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 blah. And it's that's what made me realize like that is the thing that we need the most, is to be able to hear from women like yourself, and others who are able to either shed some light on their journey, to tell their story in a way that makes us feel encouraged to like either go out and not do the same thing, but go out and do what we're supposed to be doing. Go out and seek after that thing that makes us most passionate and excited. So I'm just super appreciative for you, number one, for sharing. But I feel like this was just in such alignment, and I'm happy because I think listeners are going to really benefit from just like tuning in and hearing your story, because it's so magnificent, yet, for lack of better words, because it's not simple, but it's simple. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there's not like this big thing that you did, the secret sauce that you can share. It's literally just going after the things you love and being yourself, which I love.
Yeah. And then the rest is like history, the rest will come to you.
Exactly.
When you're in alignment, like things just happen. And I think that's been my story a lot.
Exactly. Well, I love it. So I want to talk about Inside and Out a little bit more specifically from a product standpoint for listeners. Listen, y'all have to head to the website right now. We're going to share some exclusive deets at the end of the conversation. But Nya, tell us, what are your top 3 favorite products? What
oh my God.
People are going to log it on right now.
Yeah.
What do they need to have in their cart?
Okay. This is like choosing your favorite child, but top 3, I'll say there's always going to be a special place in my heart for the Better Everyday Journal, because that was our first product. When I first launched my business, it was one product, going back to like being simple. Like we're very simplistic as a company. We want to create easy tools that are like easily integrated into your life. So that's a great guided journal. There's like one journal prompt for every single day of the year, all related to self-love, healing, introspection, growth. Second, I would say Dig Deeper Journal. I've recently been using that a lot recently. It's kind of like a go at your own pace, different themes, different prompts, but really digging deeper into like who you are, what you want from your life, and what your experiences have been. And then I would say third, we just launched about a month ago our Zodiac collection. So for those of you who are astrology lovers, we have journals that are dedicated to your specific zodiac sign. I think what's really cool with it is it comes with a journal prompt card. So it's actually like a blank journal. It'll have your sign, some characteristics, and an intro section, but it also comes with a card that asks like very targeted questions towards your sign. So I'm a Virgo. It'd be asking me some questions where I've got to be like, okay, stop coming for me. But yeah, so definitely check that one out as well.
That's so funny. I love how she said, it's like picking your favorite child and then listed them all. Like,
Yeah.
No worries. No, I love that. I'm so excited. So for all of you guys listening and tuning in, we have a special code for you to use at checkout, TMD10. So the minor detail 10, basically, TMD10 for 10% off at checkout. So be sure to go and check out Inside and Out. Listen, my shipment is literally at the door. Not literally at the door, but I got an email that said a delivery was on its way. And I'm like, again, perfect timing. Like we're talking today. I almost had the product to show y'all, but I kid you not, I cannot wait to dive in. I am someone that loves guided anything. Like in the morning, I'll have quiet time with God. I'll do devotionals and things like that because I feel like it's really nice to just like anchor down and be able to have something to kind of lead my thoughts, basically. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's like a little bit of ADHD, I'm not sure. But having a reflection journal where it's like, okay, I also can dig deeper into myself and have those leading questions, sort of like prompts even, I'm really excited to be using. So must ask you this next question, Nya, because it wouldn't be the minor detail if you did not answer it. But as you know, the conversation, the podcast is the minor detail. What is something you'd suggest is one detail or the minor detail that you want listeners to walk away with?
Yeah. I would say really just going back to like being that student of life and really like taking every experience as an opportunity to learn and to pour into yourself. I think something that has been extremely beneficial in me is just like being open to learning from other people who have done it before you, from brands, from podcasts. Like when I was first starting my business, like I told myself that I was going to consume a lot of positive content. So that meant like I was reading a lot. I was listening to other founders that were doing amazing things in their industry. And I think that has really given me perspective because, you know, like even if in your circle, you may not have people that have done exactly what you're trying to do, I'm sure there's someone that you can learn from. And there's just so many free resources out there. So definitely be a student of life and, you know, learn from every experience would be my takeaway.
I love that. Be a student of life, y'all. Don't take that lightly.
Yeah.
Well, this is the conversation. Drops mic. It was so beautiful. Before we go officially, you have to let us know where can listeners find you on social, find Inside and Out on social. I'll also make sure that all this information is in the show notes as well, of course. But let us know where we can find you and stalk you and follow you and all the
Yeah, you can find my personal account at Nya Jones on Instagram, or you can find my business page at Inside and Out on both Instagram and TikTok. Also, check out our website, insideandout.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Nya, thank you for being here. This was seriously such an amazing conversation. Please, please, please take this as encouragement to go after the things that you feel so passionate about, that you feel are like urgently pulling you in that direction, because it was literally made for you. And literally take this as proof of concept that if Nya can do it, so can you. Thank you again. I can't wait. I can't wait for y'all to tune in and just keep the conversation. So until we meet again, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for having me.